She flew 3,000 miles to watch her best friend get married, not to fall for the one man who looked at her like she was the only interesting thing in a room full of aristocrats. He was cold, tattooed, and completely off limits. She gave him 48 hours. He gave her a reason to stay. Hello, beautiful Pride family. Welcome back to another beautiful story. Your unwavering support means the world to me, and I'm committed to bringing you even more heartwarming stories as I continue to grow and evolve every day. If you're joining us for the first time today, please drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to officially become part of our Pride family. Now, let's get into today's story. The taxi wound through the Tuscan hills like a thread being pulled through green velvet, and Candice Blanc pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape unfold in shades she had only ever seen in magazines. Olive groves stretched toward the horizon in neat, silver-green rows. Vineyards climbed the slopes in terraced perfection. The late afternoon sun turned everything gold, and she should have felt something. Joy, maybe. Wonder. Instead, she felt the weight of 3,000 miles and a broken heart pressing against her chest like a stone. She had not slept on the flight from New York. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jeremy. Jeremy in their bed. Jeremy with his hands on someone else. Jeremy looking at her with something worse than guilt when she walked in, something that looked almost like relief, as if he had been waiting for an excuse to end things, and she had finally given him one by coming home early. 3 years. 3 years of building a life with someone who had apparently been building an exit the entire time. Candice exhaled slowly and reached into her bag for her phone. The screen was cluttered with messages from Serena, her best friend since college, the bride whose wedding had dragged her across an ocean when all she wanted to do was curl up in her apartment and eat her weight in ice cream. The latest message read, "Where are you? The villa is insane. There's an infinity pool that looks like it drops off into the vineyards. Hurry up, I need my maid of honor." Candice typed back, 20 minutes out, don't start the party without me. She did not mention that she had been crying on and off for the entire cab ride from the airport in Florence. She did not mention that her eyes were probably swollen and her carefully applied makeup was definitely ruined. Serena did not need to know any of that. Serena was getting married in 3 days to a man who actually loved her, a man who had never once made her feel like she was too much or not enough. And Candice refused to cast even the smallest shadow over her best friend's happiness. The taxi crested a hill, and Villa San Michele appeared below like something conjured from a dream. The main house was a sprawling, cream-colored structure with terracotta roof tiles that glowed warm in the dying light. Cypress trees stood like dark green sentinels along the gravel drive. Candice could see the glint of water from the infinity pool Serena had mentioned, and beyond it, row after row of grapevines descending toward a valley that looked painted rather than real. She was going to fake being happy if it killed her. The driver helped her with her bags, and Candice overtipped him because she was too exhausted to do the math on the currency conversion. She stood in the circular drive for a moment, her 2 suitcases beside her, feeling entirely out of place. The other guests were already here, she knew. The groom's family, mostly. Italian aristocracy, with old money and older names. People who summered in places like this, rather than fantasized about them from cramped Brooklyn apartments. The front doors burst open before she could steel herself, and then Serena was there, blonde and glowing and so beautiful in a simple white sundress that Candice felt her heart crack just a little more, this time from love rather than loss. "You're here." Serena threw her arms around Candice and squeezed tight enough to hurt. "Oh my God, you're actually here. I was starting to think you'd changed your mind. And miss watching you marry the love of your life?" "Never." Serena pulled back and studied Candice's face with the penetrating attention of someone who had known her for 15 years. Her smile faltered, almost imperceptibly. "You've been crying. Allergies. The pollen here is insane." "Candice, I'm fine." Candice forced brightness into her voice, into her eyes, into the very cells of her body. I'm completely fine. I'm in Tuscany. I'm about to drink my body weight in wine. What could possibly be wrong? Serena did not look convinced, but she also did not push. That was the thing about best friends. They knew when to pry and when to let you pretend, and right now, Candice needed to pretend. Come on, Serena said, linking her arm through Candice's. Let me show you to your room. You have one of the good ones, obviously. Corner suite with a view of the vineyards. Marco's aunt tried to claim it, but I told her my maid of honor had seniority. They walked through the villa, and Candice tried to absorb the beauty of it, the frescoed ceilings and the marble floors and the antique furniture. Staff members in crisp white shirts moved through the space with quiet efficiency. Through a set of French doors, she caught a glimpse of a terrace where well-dressed people were gathered with wine glasses, their laughter floating on the warm evening air. The welcome mixer starts in an hour, Serena said, as they climbed a curved staircase. Nothing formal, just drinks and appetizers, so everyone can meet before the rehearsal tomorrow. I'll be there. You don't have to if you're tired. I know the flight was brutal. Serena. Candice stopped on the landing and turned to face her friend. I flew 3,000 miles to watch you get married. I'm not hiding in my room. I'm going to put on something pretty, drink excellent wine, and charm the hell out of your new in-laws. Serena's eyes went soft. I really love you, you know that? I really love you too. Now show me this corner suite before I collapse. The room was, predictably, stunning. High ceilings with exposed wooden beams, a king-sized bed draped in white linen. French doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking exactly the view Serena had promised, vineyards rolling toward the horizon in neat green rows, the sky above them fading from gold to rose to the deep blue of approaching night. Candice stood on that balcony after Serena left, gripping the wrought iron railing and breathing in the scent of lavender and sun-warmed earth. She told herself she was going to be fine. She told herself that Jeremy did not deserve any more of her tears. She told herself that this weekend was about Serena, about love, about celebrating something beautiful and real, and she was not going to let her own broken heart ruin any of it. Then she went inside, sat on the edge of that pristine white bed, and cried until she had nothing left. The dress she chose for the welcome mixer was a yellow dress that wrapped around her curves and set off the rich brown of her skin. She had always loved color, loved the way jewel tones looked against her complexion, and tonight she needed armor. She needed to walk into a room full of strangers and feel like herself, or at least like the version of herself she wanted to project. She took extra care with her makeup, concealing the evidence of her earlier breakdown, defining her eyes, painting her lips a shade of red that her mother always said was too bold, but that Candice thought was exactly bold enough. She twisted her natural hair up into an elegant arrangement and studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was beautiful. Candice knew this objectively, the way she knew the sky was blue and water was wet. She had high cheekbones and full lips and skin that glowed like burnished copper in the right light. But Jeremy had made her feel invisible in the end. He had looked at her and seen something insufficient, something not quite worth keeping, and that knowledge had burrowed under her skin like a splinter she could not extract. She pressed her palms flat against the cool marble of the bathroom counter and spoke to her reflection with deliberate firmness. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you do not need anyone to validate that. The words felt hollow, but she said them anyway. The terrace was crowded when Candice descended, the golden hour light casting everything in honeyed warmth. White-jacketed servers circulated with trays of wine and bruschetta, and tiny, perfect things Candice could not name. The guests were exactly what she had expected. Elegant Italian women with designer clothes and effortless style. Men in linen suits who looked like they had been born holding wine glasses. Everyone beautiful, everyone polished, everyone looking at Candice when she stepped outside with expressions that ranged from curious to assessing to something that felt uncomfortably close to dismissive. She was the only black woman here. She had known she would be. Serena had warned her that Marco's family was old Italian money, generationally wealthy, and about as diverse as a snow-covered mountaintop. Candice had told her it was fine, that she was used to being the only one in rooms like this, that it did not bother her anymore. That was a lie, of course. It always bothered her. The way people looked at her, a beat too long, trying to place her, trying to figure out how she fit. The way conversations sometimes stuttered when she joined them, as if her presence required recalibration. But Candice Blanc had spent her entire life walking into rooms that were not built for her and making them hers anyway. She squared her shoulders, accepted a glass of Chianti from a passing server, and went to find her best friend. Serena was surrounded by what appeared to be the groom's extended family, a cluster of well-dressed Italians who were all speaking rapid fire and gesturing expressively. Marco stood beside his bride, tall and handsome, and looking at Serena like she had hung the moon, and Candice felt a pang of something that was not quite jealousy, but close enough to shame her. She hung back, not wanting to interrupt, and found a spot near the edge of the terrace where she could observe without being observed. The view from here was even more spectacular than from her room. The infinity pool stretched toward the horizon, its still surface reflecting the darkening sky. Beyond it, the vineyards descended into the valley in neat terraced rows, and far in the distance she could see the silhouettes of other villas dotting the hills. It was the most beautiful place she had ever been, and she had never felt more alone. "You look like you would rather be anywhere else." The voice came from her left, low and slightly amused, and Candice turned to find a woman about her age, with sharp blonde hair and sharper cheekbones, watching her with open curiosity. "That obvious?" Candice asked. "Only to someone who feels exactly the same way." The woman extended her hand. "Julia, I'm Marco's cousin, the disappointing one who became a lawyer instead of marrying into more money." Candice liked her immediately. Candice, Serena's maid of honor. The disappointing one who let her boyfriend cheat on her instead of somehow preventing it through sheer force of will. Julia's eyebrows rose. "Well, that was refreshingly honest. It's been a long day. My filter is broken." "Good. Filters are boring." Julia clinked her wineglass against Candice's. "To being disappointments together." They drank, and Candice felt something loosen in her chest. Maybe this weekend would not be entirely unbearable. Maybe she would find pockets of connection in unexpected places. Maybe she would survive this after all. And then she heard it. The sound of rotors cutting through the air, growing louder, drawing every eye on the terrace upward. A helicopter was descending toward the villa, sleek and black, and entirely out of place in this pastoral landscape. It landed somewhere beyond the main house, the sound of its engine filling the evening before cutting off abruptly, leaving behind a silence that felt almost shocked. "Oh, wonderful," Julia said, and her voice had gone flat in a way that suggested the arrival was anything but. "The prodigal son returns." "Who?" Candice asked. "Luca Rossi, Marco's best man. Also his older stepbrother, though you would never know it from the way they avoid each other." Candice remembered the name from Serena's wedding emails. Luca Rossi, tech billionaire, notorious recluse, rumored to be difficult in approximately 17 different ways. "He's the one who builds the security software, right?" Candice asked. Serena mentioned him. "Builds, sells, and uses the profits to fund a lifestyle of aggressive solitude. Yes." Julia took a long sip of wine. "Luca does not do family events. The fact that he's here at all is a minor miracle, or a major guilt trip." Hard to say with those two. The crowd on the terrace had shifted, everyone's attention oriented toward the villa's main entrance. Candice could feel the anticipation in the air, the way people straightened and primped and prepared themselves for something worth preparing for. She told herself she was not curious. She told herself that billionaires and their drama were exactly the kind of distraction she did not need. She told herself that she was going to finish her wine, find Serena, and spend the rest of the evening being the supportive, cheerful maid of honor she had promised to be. Then Luca Rossi walked onto the terrace, and Candice forgot every single thing she had just told herself. He was tall, over 6 feet, with the kind of lean, angular build that suggested either careful discipline or deliberate neglect. His skin was pale in a way that seemed almost deliberate, as if he had been avoiding the sun for years. Dark hair, longer than was fashionable, swept back from a face that was too sharp to be handsome and too compelling to look away from. And his eyes, even from across the terrace, Candice could see that his eyes were wrong. Not the color, which was some shade of grey or blue that the fading light made impossible to determine, but the expression. Cold, distant, looking at the assembled guests like they were specimens under glass rather than people he might actually want to know. He wore a suit, dark and perfectly tailored, but under the open collar of his white shirt she caught a glimpse of black ink climbing his neck. Tattoos. Unexpected, given everything else about him. A crack in the polished facade. Marco broke away from Serena to greet his brother, and Candice watched them embrace with the stiff formality of men who were performing affection rather than feeling it. They exchanged words she could not hear, and then Luca's gaze swept across the terrace with obvious disinterest, before landing somehow, inexplicably, on her. Candice felt the impact of that look like a physical thing, a jolt that started in her chest and radiated outward. He was not looking at her the way the others had, with curiosity or assessment or dismissal. He was looking at her like he had found the one thing in this entire gathering that did not bore him completely. She raised her chin and looked back. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The party continued around them, conversation and laughter and the clink of glasses, but Candice was aware of none of it. There was only this man she had never met, watching her across a crowd of strangers with an intensity that felt almost aggressive. Then the corner of his mouth curved, just slightly, an expression that was not quite a smile but acknowledged something between them anyway, and he looked away. Candice realized she had been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly and drained the rest of her wine. "Interesting," Julia said from beside her. "What? I have never seen Luca look at anyone like that." "Like what?" Julia smiled, and there was something knowing in it that made Candice want to argue. "Like they might actually be worth his time." Candice did not respond. She was too busy trying to slow her heartbeat back to something resembling normal. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk, and pretending she was not hyper-aware of exactly where Luca was standing at every moment. She met Marco's mother, an elegant woman who looked at Candice's dark skin just a beat too long before producing a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She met various aunts and uncles and cousins whose names she immediately forgot. She found Serena and held her hand while the bride fretted about flower arrangements and seating charts and whether the weather would hold for the outdoor ceremony. Through all of it, Candice felt watched. She told herself she was imagining it. She told herself that Luca was not tracking her movements the same way she was tracking his. But every time she glanced in his direction, she found him looking back, and the spark of that connection did something dangerous to her resolve. She excused herself to find the bar, needing something stronger than wine, needing a moment away from the crowd and the curious looks and the weight of her own loneliness. The bar was set up at the far end of the terrace, slightly removed from the main gathering, and Candice leaned against it gratefully and ordered a whiskey neat, ignoring the bartender's slightly surprised expression. "A woman who knows what she wants." The voice was low, slightly rough, carrying an accent that was Italian smoothed by years of something else. American schooling, maybe. International business. Candice did not turn around. "That surprises you?" she asked. "Nothing surprises me." Luca moved to stand beside her at the bar, and even though she refused to look at him, she could feel his presence like a change in temperature. "But it does interest me." She accepted her whiskey from the bartender and took a slow sip before finally turning to face him. Up close, he was even more unsettling. The angles of his face were sharp enough to cut, and his eyes were grey. She could see that now, the pale grey of winter skies and frozen lakes. The tattoos she had glimpsed earlier extended further than she had realized, black ink disappearing beneath his collar in patterns she could not quite make out. "I'm Candice," she said, "maid of honor, best friend of the bride. I know who you are." "Then you have me at a disadvantage." His mouth curved again, that almost smile that seemed to be the closest he got to actual amusement. "I doubt anyone has ever had you at a disadvantage in your life. That's a lot of assumption from a man who's known me for 30 seconds. I'm an excellent judge of character." Candice raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call staring at people across crowded terraces, judging their character? I call it finding the one person in a crowd of 200 who looks as unhappy to be here as I am." The words hit closer to home than Candice wanted to admit. She covered by taking another sip of her whiskey. "Who says I'm unhappy?" "Your eyes, your shoulders. The way you're holding that glass like it's the only thing keeping you from bolting." He ordered something from the bartender without looking, something Italian that Candice did not catch. And when he turned back to her, his expression had shifted. Still cold, still distant, but with something underneath that looked almost like recognition. "Also, I know heartbreak when I see it. It takes one to know one." Candice felt her defenses slam into place. "You don't know anything about me. I know you came here alone. I know you've been crying recently. Probably on the flight over. Maybe again in your room. I know you're forcing yourself to smile every time someone talks to you, and I know it's exhausting." He accepted his drink, something amber in a crystal glass, and swirled it slowly. "I know because I'm doing the exact same thing, minus the smiling. I've never been good at pretending, and yet here you are, at a party you clearly don't want to attend, pretending to be a functioning member of your brother's wedding party." "Here I am," he agreed, failing spectacularly at pretending. "The difference between us is that you actually care about maintaining the illusion. I gave up on that years ago." Candice studied him for a long moment. He was rude. He was cold. He was exactly the kind of arrogant, wealthy man she had no interest in engaging with. But there was something in his honesty that felt like a rope thrown to a drowning woman. Everyone else at this party was performing. He was not. "Your family seems happy to see you," she said, and let the skepticism drip from every word. "My family is happy to see the Rossi name represented at another Rossi wedding. Whether I'm attached to that name is largely irrelevant." "That's bleak." He took a drink. "When's the last time someone was truly honest with you?" The question pierced something she had been trying to keep protected. She thought of Jeremy. She thought of all the times he had told her he loved her, while apparently loving someone else. She thought of the lies she had believed because she wanted to believe them. Too long ago to remember, she admitted, and hated herself for the admission. Luca nodded as if she had confirmed something he already suspected. "Then let me offer you some honesty now. This wedding is going to be 4 days of forced proximity with people who value appearance over substance. The wine will be excellent, the food will be better, but the company, with a few exceptions, will be insufferable." His grey eyes held hers, with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You seem like one of the exceptions. You've known me for 3 minutes. I'm an excellent judge of character," he repeated. "I told you." Despite herself, Candice felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "And what does your excellent judgment tell you about me?" He was quiet for a moment, studying her with an attention that felt almost physical. When he spoke, his voice was lower than before. "You're stronger than you think you are. Whatever broke you, whatever happened that put that look in your eyes, it didn't destroy you. You're still standing, still fighting, still walking into rooms where you don't belong, and daring anyone to question your right to be there." He paused. "Also, you have terrible taste in whiskey. That's a 15-year single malt, and you're drinking it like it's medicine." Candice laughed, an actual laugh, surprising herself. "It is medicine, just not the kind you're supposed to enjoy. Everything worth having is supposed to be enjoyed." He said it simply, like a statement of fact. Otherwise, what's the point? The crowd behind them had grown louder, the party warming up as the sky darkened and the wine flowed. Candice was aware that they had been standing together too long, that people were probably watching, that Serena was probably wondering where she had gone. But she could not make herself move away from this strange, cold, unexpectedly honest man who looked at her like she was worth looking at. "I should get back," she said, and did not move. "Serena will be looking for me." Neither of them moved. The tension between them was a tangible thing, a current in the air that made Candice's skin feel too tight. "I'm on a man embargo," she heard herself say. "Full stop. No exceptions. My best friend made me promise." Luca's eyebrow rose slightly. A man embargo. No dating, no flirting, no anything. For the foreseeable future. "And you're telling me this because you're looking at me like you're considering something, and I want to be clear up front that whatever you're considering, it's not happening." He was quiet for a moment, and then he did something that transformed his entire face. He smiled. Not the half-curve of his mouth from before, but an actual smile, slow and devastating, carving lines around his eyes and revealing teeth that were slightly imperfect and entirely human. "I wasn't considering anything," he said. "But I appreciate the warning." Candice felt heat climb her cheeks. "Good. Great. Then we understand each other." "Perfectly." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To your embargo. May it bring you whatever peace you're looking for." She clinked her glass against his, and when their fingers brushed, she felt it like an electric shock, a spark that travelled up her arm and lodged somewhere behind her ribs. She pulled back too quickly, and she saw in his eyes that he had noticed. "Good night, Candice," he said. "Good night, Luca." She walked away before she could change her mind about anything, and she did not look back, even though she could feel his gaze on her all the way across the terrace. The hours that followed were a blur. Candice found Serena and attached herself to her best friend's side, laughing at jokes she did not really hear, nodding at introductions she immediately forgot. She drank too much wine and not enough water, and told herself repeatedly that she was not thinking about grey eyes and black tattoos and a smile that had rearranged something inside her. The party began to wind down around 10. Guests drifted toward their rooms, the terrace emptying slowly until only the diehards remained, clustered in small groups with nightcaps and cigarettes. Candice helped Serena navigate a minor crisis involving a missing shipment of wedding favors, talked Marco's aunt out of a passive-aggressive seating chart coup, and finally found herself alone. She stood on the edge of the terrace, looking out at the infinity pool and the vineyards beyond it, and let herself feel the full weight of everything she had been pushing away. The heartbreak, the loneliness, the bone-deep exhaustion of pretending to be fine. The night air was cool against her skin, carrying the scent of lavender and ripening grapes. Stars had emerged overhead, more than she had ever seen in New York, scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It made her want to cry. She heard footsteps behind her, measured and unhurried, and she knew who it was before he spoke. "You're still here." Luca stopped beside her at the terrace railing, close enough that she could smell him. Something clean and masculine and expensive, with an undertone of smoke that suggested he had been somewhere having a cigarette he did not want anyone to see. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "Neither could I." He was not looking at the view. He was looking at her, though I suspect for different reasons. "Your brother's wedding keeping you up?" "My brother's wedding is the least of my concerns." He paused. The directness of it stole her breath. She had expected him to circle around the truth, to play the games that men like him always played. But there was nothing playful in his voice, just honesty, stark and unvarnished. "You don't know me," she said again. "Yay, right. But I've met hundreds of people at events like this, thousands maybe, and I've never wanted to keep talking to any of them." He turned to face her fully. And in the moonlight, his features were carved marble, his tattoos dark shadows climbing his throat. I walked into that party prepared to count the minutes until I could leave, and instead I spent the entire night wondering where you were and whether you were thinking about me too. Candice's heart was beating too fast. That's very forward. I'm a forward person. It saves time. And what exactly do you think is going to happen here? I don't know. He said it simply, without pretense. That's what interests me. I always know what's going to happen. I build companies that predict human behavior. I read people the way other people read books. But you, he shook his head slightly, I can't read you. I don't know what you're going to do next. I don't know what you're thinking. And I find that I want to know. Very badly. The air between them had changed, thickening with something that felt dangerous. Candice thought about her embargo. She thought about Jeremy, about the betrayal that still sat like a wound in her chest. She thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. I told you, she said, and her voice came out rougher than she intended. I'm not looking for anything. Neither am I. He took a step closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his body in the cool night air. I don't do relationships. I don't do romance. I don't do any of the things that people come to weddings hoping to find. Then what are you doing right now? Standing next to a beautiful woman and telling her the truth. His voice had dropped, velvet and smoke. The truth is that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you across that terrace. The truth is that I came out here hoping you would still be here. The truth is that I want to kiss you right now more than I have wanted anything in longer than I can remember. Candice's breath caught. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because she struggled for a reason that was not simply because it makes me want things I can't have. Because we just met. Because you're the best man, and I'm the maid of honor, and we have 3 more days of this wedding to get through. Because I am not in a place to be anyone's distraction. But I'm not complaining. He said it quietly. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Candice stared at him, at this man she had known for mere hours, who was saying things that felt more honest than 3 years of relationship with Jeremy had ever felt. You're broken, she said. She did not mean it as an accusation. Completely, he agreed without flinching. I've been broken for years. I've made peace with it. But standing here with you, I'm starting to wonder if peace was just another word for giving up. Every rational part of her brain was screaming at her to go back to her room, lock the door, and forget this conversation ever happened. But Candice had been rational for so long. She had done everything right. She had been loyal and loving and patient, and it had gotten her nothing but a broken heart and a front-row seat to her own humiliation. Maybe rational was overrated. Maybe just for one night she could let herself want something. I'm broken too, she said. The admission felt like pulling off armor. I found my boyfriend with someone else 2 weeks ago, in our bed, in the apartment I thought we would live in forever. She laughed, and it came out bitter. So if you're looking for someone whole, you've come to the wrong place. Luca was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched her face, just his fingertips against her cheek, so light she might have imagined it. I'm not looking for whole, he said. I'm not sure I'd know what to do with whole. But broken? His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. Broken, I understand. Broken, I know how to hold. Candice closed her eyes. The touch was barely there, feather-light, but she felt it in every cell of her body. This is insane, she whispered. Serena would kill me. Then we won't tell Serena. His fingers slid into her hair, cradling her head with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his cold exterior. We won't tell anyone. This can be ours. Just ours. Just for now. She opened her eyes and found him close, closer than she had realized, his face inches from hers. His grey eyes were dark in the moonlight, but there was nothing cold in them now. There was heat. There was want. There was something that looked almost like wonder. "48 hours," she heard herself say. "That's all we have until the wedding." 48 hours, he agreed. No feelings, no expectations. When the bride walks down the aisle, this ends. Whatever this is, he repeated, and his voice was a promise. "And you can't tell anyone. This stays between us. Between us." His thumb traced her lower lip, and she felt the touch all the way to her toes. "I don't share what's mine, Candice, not even information about it. I'm not yours." "Not yet." He said it without arrogance, without presumption, just a statement of possibility. "But for the next 48 hours, I'd like to find out if you could be." She should say no. She should walk away. She should remember the embargo and the heartbreak and all the reasons this was going to end badly. Instead, she whispered, "Kiss me." Luca did not hesitate. He pulled her in and brought his mouth to hers, and the first touch of his lips was soft, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She did not pull away. She leaned in, and his arms wrapped around her, and then there was nothing soft about it at all. He kissed her like a man who had been starving and had finally found sustenance. Deep and hungry and thorough, his tongue tracing the seam of her lips until she opened for him, his hands fisting in her hair and pulling her closer until there was no space between them at all. She could feel every line of his body against hers, lean muscle and barely contained heat, and she kissed him back with all the desperation she had been trying to hide. This was insane. This was reckless. This was exactly the kind of decision that past Candice would have judged and future Candice would probably regret. Present Candice did not care. When they finally broke apart, Luca pressed his forehead against hers and laughed, low and surprised. "I haven't felt like that in years," he said. "Like what?" "Like the world might actually be worth paying attention to." She pulled back to look at him, at this beautiful, broken man who had appeared in her life like a comet and was about to burn through it just as quickly. His lips were slightly swollen from kissing her. His eyes were bright in a way they had not been before. He looked, she realized, almost happy. 48 hours, she said again. 48 hours. He took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles that was almost courtly, completely at odds with the heat that still simmered between them. "Starting now." He did not let go of her hand. Instead, he laced his fingers through hers, pale against dark, and looked at her with an expression that made her feel seen in a way she had not felt in months. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" "Somewhere that isn't here. Somewhere we can be alone. Somewhere I can learn every single thing about you before the sun comes up." "That sounds dangerous." "The best things always are." Candice thought about Serena, asleep somewhere in this villa, dreaming about flower arrangements and forever. She thought about the guests in their expensive rooms, the wedding that would happen in 3 days, the life she would go back to when this was over. Then she looked at Luca Rossi, with his grey eyes and his black tattoos and his unexpected honesty, and she made a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. "Lead the way," she said. His smile was slow and devastating and full of promise. And Candice followed him into the Tuscan night, leaving her caution behind like a discarded coat, ready for whatever the next 48 hours would bring. The morning light came through the curtains like warm honey, and Candice woke slowly, aware before she opened her eyes that something fundamental had shifted in her world. She was not in her own room. The sheets beneath her were softer than anything she had ever slept on, and there was a weight across her waist, an arm draped over her with casual possession, and the steady sound of breathing behind her. She opened her eyes. Luca's bedroom was larger than her entire apartment in Brooklyn. High ceilings with exposed beams, walls the color of aged parchment, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Through the tall windows, she could see the vineyards stretching toward the horizon, still misty in the early light. They had not slept together, not in the way she had expected when she followed him into the night. Instead, they had talked for hours, curled together on his balcony with a bottle of wine neither of them finished. He had told her about building his company from nothing, about the 17-hour days and the years of isolation, and the moment he realized he had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams and felt absolutely nothing. She had told him about Jeremy, about the slow erosion of her confidence, about walking into that bedroom and seeing her entire future collapse. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, she had fallen asleep mid-sentence, and he had carried her to his bed. She remembered that, the feeling of being lifted like she weighed nothing, the softness of the mattress, the warmth of his body settling beside her. Now his arm tightened around her waist, and she felt his lips brush the back of her neck. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured against her skin. "I can hear it from here. I'm thinking that I should probably sneak back to my room before anyone notices I'm missing." Probably. He did not let her go. Instead, his hand spread flat against her stomach, holding her in place. "Or you could stay for a few more minutes and let me make you breakfast." "You cook?" "I make excellent coffee. And mediocre toast. Does that count?" Candice laughed despite herself. "Barely." "Then stay, and lower your expectations accordingly." She should go. She knew she should go. The wedding party would be gathering soon for the day's activities, and Serena would notice if her maid of honor appeared in last night's dress with yesterday's makeup smeared across her face. But Luca's body was warm against hers, and his hand on her stomach felt like an anchor, and she could not quite make herself move. "5 more minutes," she said. "I'll take it." He pressed a kiss to her shoulder, then another to the curve of her neck, and Candice felt her resolve weakening with each touch. This was supposed to be simple. 48 hours, no feelings, physical release only. But lying here in his arms as the Tuscan sun climbed the sky, she was starting to suspect that nothing about Luca Rossi was simple. "There's a wine tasting today," she said, trying to ground herself in practicality. "For the wedding party. Serena mentioned it yesterday." "Ah, yes. My brother's attempt to impress his future in-laws with the family vineyards." Luca's voice was wry. "I'll be expected to attend. Make small talk. Pretend I care about tannins and terroir. You don't care about wine? I care about drinking it. The rest is performance." His hand traced lazy circles on her stomach through the thin fabric of her dress. "But now, I find myself with a reason to attend that has nothing to do with family obligation." Candice turned in his arms to face him, and the sight of him in the morning light made her breath catch. His dark hair was disheveled, falling across his forehead. The sharp lines of his face were softened by sleep. And his eyes, those grey eyes that had been so cold last night, were warm now, watching her with an expression that looked almost tender. "We should probably establish some ground rules," she said. "For today, rules about how we behave in public. We can't just, I don't know, look at each other like this in front of everyone." "Like what?" "Like you want to devour me." His smile was slow and devastating. "But I do want to devour you. Hiding that is going to be challenging." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Luca, Candice." He said her name like it was a word he wanted to taste, rolling it on his tongue. "I will be the picture of restraint in public, if that's what you need. I will keep my hands to myself and my thoughts behind my teeth. But know that every moment I'm not touching you, I will be thinking about touching you. Every time I look away, it will be an act of willpower. And every second we're surrounded by people who don't know what we are to each other, I will be counting the minutes until I can have you alone again." She did not have a response to that. She was not sure one existed. Instead, she kissed him, and the kiss that started soft quickly caught fire, his hands tangling in her hair, her body arching into his. They had 48 hours, less now, and she intended to make every moment count. The wine tasting was held in a centuries-old cellar beneath the villa, stone walls lined with barrels that had been aging Rossi wines for generations. Candice arrived with Serena, having successfully sneaked back to her room for a shower and a change of clothes before her best friend came looking for her. She wore a sundress the color of ripe peaches, and she had twisted her hair up in a way that exposed the long line of her neck, a decision she realized might have been subconscious. Luca was already there when they descended the stone steps into the cool dimness of the cellar. He stood with Marco and several of the older guests, a glass of red wine in his hand, looking every inch the reluctant heir to a family empire. He wore dark trousers and a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, exposing the tattoos on his forearms, black ink stark against pale skin. Their eyes met across the cellar, and Candice felt that same electric jolt she had felt last night. He looked away first, returning his attention to the conversation around him, but she saw the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. So the game had begun. The next 2 hours were an exercise in exquisite torture. The sommelier led them through the Rossi wine collection, explaining the history of each vintage, the specific conditions of each harvest, the techniques that had been passed down through generations. Candice tasted wines she could never afford and pretended to understand the nuances being described, nodding along with Serena while her attention remained fixed on the man who was very carefully not looking at her. Luca played his role perfectly. He was attentive to the other guests, answered questions about the family vineyards with surprising knowledge, and maintained exactly the proper distance from Candice at all times. But she noticed things, the way his jaw tightened when another man stood too close to her, the way his gaze flickered to her when he thought no one was watching, the way his voice seemed to carry across the cellar, meant for her ears even when his words were directed elsewhere. By the time the group moved outside to tour the vineyards themselves, Candice was strung tight as a wire. The vines stretched in endless rows, heavy with ripening grapes, the leaves turning gold at their edges as autumn approached. The sommelier led them along the main path, explaining the different varieties, the soil composition, the precise conditions that made Tuscan wine unique. Candice found herself drifting toward the back of the group, and she was not entirely surprised when Luca materialized beside her. "You're very good at this," she murmured, keeping her eyes forward. "At what? Pretending you don't want to touch me." "I never said I didn't want to." His voice was low, meant only for her. "I said I would restrain myself. One is about desire, the other is about control." He paused. "And right now, my control is hanging by a very thin thread." The group ahead of them had rounded a corner, disappearing behind a row of particularly tall vines. Candice and Luca were suddenly, briefly, alone. His hand closed around her wrist before she could react, and then he was pulling her off the path, between the rows of vines, into the green shadow of the leaves. Her back hit a wooden post, and then his body was pressed against hers, and his mouth was on hers, and she forgot everything except the taste of him, wine and hunger and something that felt like desperation. "I've been thinking about this all morning," he breathed against her lips, "watching you taste wine and pretend to care about terroir, when all I could think about was how you taste, how you sound when you sigh, how you felt in my arms when you finally stopped talking and fell asleep. Someone could see us. No one can see us." His lips traced the line of her jaw. "We're invisible in here. Just two more shapes in the shadow of the vines. Luca. I love how you say my name." His hands found her waist, pulling her closer. "Say it again, Luca." It came out breathless, barely a whisper, and she felt him smile against her throat. "Again. We need to go back. They'll notice we're missing. Let them notice." His mouth found the spot just below her ear, and she shivered despite the warmth of the afternoon. "Let them wonder. I don't care about any of them. I only care about this." His hands slid up her sides, leaving trails of heat in their wake. The sundress suddenly felt too thin, the afternoon too warm, the space between them too little and too much at the same time. She could feel the length of his body against hers, the evidence of his desire, and some reckless part of her wanted to give in right here, right now, propriety and discovery be damned. But footsteps sounded on the gravel path, voices carrying on the still air, and Luca pulled back with a groan that sounded almost pained. "Tonight," he said, and it was not a question. Meet me at the pool after everyone's gone to bed. The pool. I want to see you in the moonlight. His thumb traced her lower lip, his eyes dark with want. I want to see all of you. Candice nodded, not trusting her voice. He stepped back, rearranging his expression into one of casual indifference, and when the rest of the group came around the corner, he was standing a respectable distance away, examining a cluster of grapes with apparent fascination. Candice's heart was still racing. The formal dinner that night was held in the villa's grand dining room, a cavernous space with frescoed ceilings and crystal chandeliers that caught the candlelight like captured stars. Long tables had been arranged in a U-shape, dressed in white linen and laden with silver and crystal that probably cost more than Candice's student loans. She had been placed, by some cruel twist of seating chart fate, at the opposite end of the room from Luca. She could see him from where she sat, framed by candlelight and the animated gestures of the aunt beside him, but they might as well have been in different countries. The dinner was endless courses of things Candice could not pronounce, each one more elaborate than the last. She made conversation with the people around her, Serena's college roommate on one side and one of Marco's business partners on the other, smiling until her face ached. But every few minutes, her gaze would drift across the room to where Luca sat. And every time, she found him already looking at her. It was maddening. He would meet her eyes for just a moment, long enough to acknowledge the connection, but not long enough to draw attention. And then, he would look away and say something to the person beside him. But even from across the room, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped his wine glass, the constant awareness of her that he was barely concealing. The third course had just been cleared when her phone buzzed in her lap. She glanced down at the screen. You're wearing the same color as the wine. I keep thinking about staining my lips with both. She looked up to find Luca raising his glass to his mouth, taking a slow sip without looking at her. Her cheeks flushed. Another message. The candlelight is doing something criminal to your skin. You're glowing. Everyone in this room should be staring at you, and the fact that they're not is proof they're all blind. She typed back quickly, keeping the phone below the table. Stop. People will notice. His response came almost immediately. I don't care who notices. I only care that you know what I'm thinking. And right now I'm thinking about the moment everyone goes to bed, and I can finally stop pretending I don't want to tear that dress off you with my teeth. Candice nearly choked on her wine. Across the room, she saw the ghost of a smile cross his face. The dinner dragged on for 3 more hours, coffee and dessert and after-dinner drinks and toasts that seemed to multiply like rabbits. By the time the guests finally began to disperse, Candice was vibrating with anticipation. She made excuses to Serena about being tired, accepted a hug from the bride who was too wine-flushed and happy to notice anything amiss, and escaped to her room. She changed out of her dinner dress and into something simpler, a silk robe over nothing at all, and she waited until the villa had gone quiet before slipping out her door. The pool was at the far end of the property, set on a terrace that overlooked the vineyards. By day, it was a stunning infinity pool, its edge seeming to merge with the landscape beyond. By night, lit only by the moon and a scattering of stars, it was something else entirely. Magic, maybe, or a dream. Luca was already there when she arrived. He stood at the pool's edge with his back to her, looking out at the silver dark expanse of the vineyards. He had removed his jacket and his shoes. The moonlight turned his white shirt almost translucent, and she could see the shadow of more tattoos beneath the fabric, shapes she had not yet learned. He turned when he heard her approach, and the look on his face made her breath catch. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would, but hope is a dangerous thing for a man like me." He crossed to her in 3 long strides and took her face in his hands, tilting it up toward the light. "I've been thinking about you all through dinner. Every course, every toast, every endless moment of small talk with people I don't care about. All I could think was how much I wanted this. You, here, alone. We're alone now." "We are." His thumb stroked her cheekbones. "Do you trust me?" The question surprised her. "I barely know you." That's not what I asked. She considered the question. Really considered it. Did she trust him? She trusted his honesty, his directness, the way he looked at her like she was worth looking at. She trusted the way he had held her last night, like she was something precious rather than something convenient. She trusted the hunger in his eyes and the restraint he had shown, giving her every opportunity to walk away. Yes, she said, I trust you. Something shifted in his expression, a softening she had not seen before. Then trust me now. He stepped back and began unbuttoning his shirt, revealing inch by inch the canvas of his body. The tattoos she had glimpsed were part of a larger whole, black ink spreading across his chest and shoulders and down his arms. She could see now that they were not random images, but a connected narrative, ravens and roses, and thorned vines, skulls and stars, and words in languages she could not read. He shrugged the shirt off and let it fall. Your turn, he said. Candice's fingers found the tie of her robe. She pulled it loose, let the silk slide off her shoulders, stood before him in nothing but moonlight and skin. For a long moment, neither of them moved. His eyes traveled over her body with an attention that felt almost reverent, taking in every curve and plane, the dark gleam of her skin in the silver light. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, he said, and his voice was rough. I have seen sunsets over the Alps and cities from space and art that men have killed for. None of it compares to this. To you, Luca. I mean it. He closed the distance between them and traced a line from her shoulder to her elbow with one finger. Featherlight. I have spent my entire life surrounded by beautiful things. I have never wanted any of them the way I want you. He took her hand and led her to the pool's edge. The water was warm when they descended the steps together, heated to match the night air, and Candice felt it close around her like an embrace. They waded in until the water reached her shoulders, and then Luca pulled her against him and kissed her with a tenderness that broke something open in her chest. This was different from their kisses before. There was hunger still, but it was tempered by something else, something that felt dangerously close to reverence. His hands moved over her body beneath the water, learning her, memorizing her, as if he wanted to carry the shape of her with him long after this night ended. I can't stop touching you, he murmured against her mouth. I keep thinking I should have some self-control, some restraint, but then you move and I feel your skin against mine and I forget how to think at all. Then stop thinking. Is that an invitation? It's a request. He made a sound low in his throat and lifted her, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her through the water to the pool's edge. The stone was smooth and cool against her back as he pressed her against it, his body a line of heat along her front. Tell me what you want, he said. Anything, everything. Tell me, and I'll give it to you. I want you. You have me. He kissed her neck, her collarbone, the swell of her breast just above the waterline. But I need more than that. I need to know what makes you yearn, what makes you shiver, what makes you come apart so completely you forget your own name. No one had ever talked to her like this, not Jeremy, not anyone. No one had ever made her feel like her pleasure was the only thing that mattered, like learning her body was a privilege rather than a task. I don't know, she admitted. No one has ever asked me that before. Luca went still. When he pulled back to look at her, there was something fierce in his eyes, something that looked almost like anger. No one has ever asked you what you like? Not like that. Not like they actually wanted to know. Then every man you've been with before was a fool. He cupped her face in his wet hands. And I am going to spend however many hours we have left showing you exactly what you've been missing. What followed was unlike anything Candice had ever experienced. Luca was patient in a way that seemed impossible given the hunger she had seen in him, learning her responses with the attention of a man solving an equation. When she gasped, he noted it. When she trembled, he explored the cause. When she arched against him, wordless and wanting, he gave her exactly what she needed without her having to ask. They made love in the pool as the moon climbed the sky, water lapping against the edge with each movement, and when she finally shattered in his arms, crying out against his shoulder, he held her through it and whispered words she could barely hear but felt in her bones. Afterward, they lay on one of the lounges at the pool's edge, wrapped in towels and tangled together, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Candice traced the lines of his tattoos with one finger, following the path of a rose that bloomed across his chest and climbed toward his heart. "This one," she said. "Tell me about this one." He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was distant. "I got that one after my mother died. The rose was her favorite flower. She used to have them in every room of every house we owned." He paused. "She was the only person in my family who ever saw me as more than an heir to manage or a problem to solve. When she died, I was 16. I got the tattoo that week. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But his voice said otherwise. His voice said some wounds never fully healed. The rest of them came later, after other losses. The ravens are for the friends I've lost to ambition, their own and mine. The thorns are for every time I let someone close and got hurt for my trouble. The words are promises I made to myself when I was too young to know how hard they would be to keep. Candice traced a line of text on his forearm, too faded to read in the moonlight. "What does this one say? Never trust, never love, never let them see you bleed." The words hung in the air between them. Candice thought about everything that must have happened to make a 16-year-old boy ink those words into his skin, and her heart broke a little. "That sounds lonely," she said. "It is." He turned his head to look at her, and his grey eyes were unguarded in a way she had not seen before. "It was easier when I believed it. Before you walked onto that terrace and made me want to break every promise I ever made to myself. Luca." "I know." He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "I know this is supposed to be simple, no feelings, no expectations, done when the wedding's over. I know that's what we agreed. But I'm lying here with you, and for the first time in years I don't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to be anyone else, and that terrifies me more than you can possibly understand." She did not know what to say. She felt the same terror, the same creeping realization that what had started as a distraction was becoming something else entirely. Something dangerous, something real. "Tell me about your heartbreak," he said. "You know mine now. Tell me yours." Candice was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars. "Jeremy was the first person who ever made me feel chosen," she said finally. "Growing up, I was always the odd one out. Too dark for some circles, too light for others. Too ambitious for the men who wanted someone simple, too simple for the men who wanted a trophy. I spent years feeling like I was auditioning for a part I would never get." She paused. "And then Jeremy came along, and he looked at me like I was exactly what he wanted, like I was enough, just as I was. But he wasn't what he seemed. He was exactly what he seemed. I just didn't want to see it." She laughed, and it came out bitter. There were signs, looking back. The way he pulled away when things got hard. The way he always had an excuse for why he couldn't meet my friends or come to my family events. The way he made me feel like I should be grateful he chose me, like his attention was a gift I hadn't quite earned. That's not love. I know that now. I knew it then, somewhere deep down, but I wanted so badly to be loved that I was willing to pretend. She turned to face him. And then I walked in on him with someone else, and I had to stop pretending. And the worst part wasn't that he cheated. The worst part was that I wasn't even surprised. Some part of me had been waiting for it all along. Luca's expression darkened. "He made you believe you deserved to be betrayed. He made me believe I wasn't worth fighting for. Then he was blind." Luca propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with an intensity that made her shiver. "Candice, you are worth more than that man could ever understand. You are worth more than anyone who has ever made you feel small or insufficient or less than. And if I had unlimited time instead of 48 hours, I would spend every single moment proving that to you. Tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked them back. That's a big promise from a man who swore never to trust or love. I know. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Apparently you make me want to break my own rules. They stayed there until the sky began to lighten in the east, talking and touching and learning each other in ways that went far beyond the physical. By the time Candice finally crept back to her room, the villa was stirring awake around her, and she felt as though she had lived an entire lifetime in a single night. She slept for a few hours, dreaming of grey eyes and black ink, and when she woke, the sun was high, and there was a message on her phone. Tonight is the rehearsal dinner. Tomorrow is the wedding. That means this is our last full day. I want to spend every possible second of it with you. Meet me in the olive grove at noon. Bring your smile. I'll bring everything else. Candice read the message 3 times, feeling something warm unfurl in her chest. This was supposed to be just physical, just a distraction, just 48 hours, and then back to their separate lives. But lying in this bed that still smelled like his cologne, watching the Tuscan sun climb the sky, Candice knew that she was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind of trouble that came from feeling too much for someone you barely knew and might never see again. She got dressed anyway and went to find him. The olive grove was ancient, trees with twisted silver trunks and leaves that whispered in the warm breeze. Luca was waiting for her at the edge of it, a picnic basket at his feet, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "You're late," he said, but he was smiling. "I'm worth waiting for." "You are." He crossed to her and kissed her softly, his hand cupping her face like she was something fragile. "I had the kitchen put together some things. Wine, cheese, fruit. I thought we could hide here for a few hours and pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist." "That sounds perfect." They spread a blanket beneath one of the oldest trees and lay in the dappled shade, feeding each other bits of cheese and figs, drinking wine that tasted like sunshine and possibility. Luca told her about the summers he had spent here as a child, before his mother died and his father became cold, when this villa was still a place of laughter and love. Candice told him about Brooklyn, about her work at the art gallery, about the apartment she could barely afford but loved because it was hers. "Come visit me," she said, surprising herself. "When this is over, come to New York and let me show you my world." He was quiet for a moment. "Is that what you want?" "I don't know what I want, but I know I don't want this to end. Neither do I." He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "But wanting and having are different things. My life is complicated, Candice. My family, my work, all of it. I'm not sure I know how to make room for anything else. You don't have to figure it out right now. But I want to." He tilted her face up to look at him. "I have spent years building walls around myself, keeping everyone at arm's length, telling myself I was safer alone. And then you came along, and all those walls started to crumble, and I don't know if I should be terrified or grateful." They stayed in the olive grove until the afternoon light began to fade, and then they walked back toward the villa, hand in hand, not caring anymore who might see them. The rehearsal dinner was in a few hours. Tomorrow was the wedding. Their 48 hours were almost up. Candice tried not to think about what came after. The trouble started at the cocktail hour before the rehearsal dinner. Candice was standing near the terrace with a glass of champagne, watching Serena fuss with the seating arrangements, when a woman's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a blade. "So you're Luca's latest amusement. I was wondering when he'd get bored of the usual type and try something more exotic." Candice turned to find a woman about her age, blonde and beautiful in that polished European way, watching her with barely concealed contempt. She wore a dress that probably cost more than Candice's car, and an expression that suggested she found Candice's presence personally offensive. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "Bianca." The woman did not extend her hand. "Luca and I were together for 2 years, before he decided he was incapable of human connection and threw it all away." Candice felt the familiar cold settle into her stomach, the one that came from being sized up and found wanting. "I'm not his amusement," she said evenly. "I'm the maid of honor. We've just been talking." "Talking?" Bianca laughed, a sharp sound with no warmth in it. "That's adorable. And you've been talking in his bedroom, in the vineyards, at the pool at 2 a.m. The staff talk, darling. Everyone knows." Heat climbed Candice's cheeks, but she refused to look away. "What's between me and Luca is none of your business." "Oh, but it is." Bianca stepped closer, dropping her voice. "Because I know Luca. I know what he does. He finds women who amuse him, plays with them until he's bored, and then discards them without a second thought. And you, with your, well..." She gestured vaguely at Candice's body, her dress, her hair. "Your uniqueness. You're probably fascinating to him. For now. But when the wedding's over and he goes back to Milan, you'll never hear from him again. That's how he works. You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Bianca's smile was a weapon. "I know you don't belong here. I know these people are wondering why someone like you is on Luca's arm. And I know that whatever fantasy you've built in your head about the two of you, it's going to end in tears. Yours, specifically." Candice's hands were shaking. She clutched her champagne glass tighter to hide it, but she knew Bianca could see. "Candice." Luca's voice came from behind her, and Candice felt a wave of relief and mortification in equal measure. She turned to find him approaching, his expression hard, his eyes fixed on Bianca with something that looked like ice. "Bianca," he said, "I thought I made it clear the last time we spoke that you should stay away from people I care about." "Oh, so you care about her?" Bianca's eyebrows rose. "That's interesting, because as I recall, you told me you were incapable of caring about anyone." "I was incapable of caring about you." His voice was flat, brutal. Bianca's perfect facade cracked for just a moment. Candice saw the hurt beneath the cruelty, the woman who had loved this man and been discarded. "You'll get bored," Bianca said, and her voice was almost desperate now. "You always do, and when you do, she'll be just as alone as I was." Luca stepped forward, putting himself between Candice and his ex, with a protectiveness that made something in Candice's chest tighten. "Let me be clear," he said, and his voice carried the cold authority of a man who was used to being obeyed. "Candice is not your concern. She is not a topic for gossip or speculation or your wounded attempts at revenge. If you speak to her again, if you so much as look at her with anything less than respect, I will make your life very uncomfortable. And you know I have the resources to do it." The threat hung in the air. Bianca's face went pale. "You've changed," she said finally. "I don't know what she's done to you, but you've changed." "Yes." Luca did not look at Candice, but he reached back and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I have." Bianca stared at their joined hands for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The terrace felt too quiet in her wake. Candice could feel people watching, whispering, wondering. But Luca's hand was warm around hers, and he was looking at her with an expression that made her forget everyone else was there. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have warned you about her. You can't warn me about every person who's going to see me and decide I don't belong. But I can make sure they know the consequences of acting on it." He lifted her hand to his lips. "You belong here, Candice. You belong wherever you choose to be, and anyone who suggests otherwise will have to go through me." The words should have been too much. They should have felt possessive or performative. But looking into his grey eyes, seeing the fierce sincerity there, Candice believed him. And more than that, she wanted to. That was the moment she realized she was falling for him. Not the attraction, which had been there from the beginning. Not the desire, which burned hotter every time they touched. But something deeper. Something terrifying. The feeling that this man, with all his edges and his walls and his broken pieces, might be exactly what she needed. And the knowledge that in less than 24 hours She was going to have to let him go. The rehearsal dinner was a blur. Candice sat through toasts and courses and conversations she would not remember, aware only of Luca across the table, watching her with an intensity that made her skin feel too tight. They could not touch, could not speak privately, could only exchange glances that said everything they could not say aloud. When the dinner finally ended and the guests dispersed, Candice found herself on the same terrace where they had first kissed, waiting for the man who had turned her carefully controlled life upside down. He came to her without a word, and when he kissed her, there was something desperate in it, something that felt like goodbye. "Come back to my room," he said against her lips. "I don't want to spend our last night apart." She went with him. Of course she went with him, and for the next several hours they mapped each other's bodies with the urgency of people running out of time. Every touch was weighted. Every whisper was a confession. Every moment together was a moment closer to the end. Afterward, lying in his arms in the tangled sheets, Candice felt the words rising in her throat, the ones she could not say, the ones that would change everything. "I think I'm falling in love with you." She bit them back. That was not part of the deal. That was not what either of them had signed up for. But then Luca shifted beside her, and his arms tightened around her waist, and she felt him press a kiss to the top of her head. "I don't want this to end," he said into the darkness. "I know that's not what we agreed. I know we said no feelings, no expectations, done when the wedding's over. But I'm lying here with you, and all I can think is that tomorrow you're going to walk out of my life, and I'm going to have to pretend that's okay." Candice's heart was pounding. "It doesn't have to end, doesn't it?" He pulled back to look at her, and his expression was anguished. "Your life is in New York. Mine is in Milan. I travel constantly. I work 18-hour days. I am, by my own admission, a disaster at relationships. What exactly would I be offering you? Long-distance calls and occasional visits, and all the loneliness that comes with loving someone who can't be there. Maybe that would be enough. Would it? Would it really?" He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "I've done this before, Candice. I've made promises I couldn't keep. I've watched relationships die slow deaths because I couldn't give them what they needed. I won't do that to you. You deserve more than half a life with someone who doesn't know how to be present. That's not your decision to make. It should be." His voice was hard now, the walls going back up. "You're better off without me, you know that. Whatever this was, it was beautiful, but it was always going to be temporary. Pretending otherwise just makes the ending harder." Candice felt something cold settle into her chest. "So that's it. You've decided for both of us. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward." The word hung between them. Luca flinched like she had struck him. "Maybe I am," he said. "Maybe I'm too broken to be anything else, but at least I'm being honest about it. That's more than most people get." Candice stared at him, at this man who had shown her so much tenderness over the past 2 days and was now retreating behind his walls like nothing between them had mattered at all. "The pact ends tomorrow," she said, and her voice was flat. "That's what we agreed. No feelings, no expectations." "Candice, don't." She got out of bed and began gathering her clothes, suddenly desperate to be anywhere but here. "You were right about one thing. Pretending makes it harder. So let's stop pretending. This was a weekend fling, nothing more. Tomorrow I'll watch my best friend get married, and then I'll fly back to New York, and we'll never see each other again. That's what you want, isn't it?" He did not answer. He did not move. Candice dressed quickly, not looking at him, and when she reached the door she paused with her hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," she said, "I thought you were worth fighting for. I thought we were. But I guess that's a decision you have to make too. And apparently you've already made it." She walked out before he could respond, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded somehow louder than a slam. The hallway was silent. The villa slept around her. And Candice made it all the way back to her room before the tears came, hot and heavy, for a man she had known for 2 days and would miss for the rest of her life. The morning of the wedding dawned golden and perfect, the kind of day that poets wrote about and brides prayed for. Candice watched the sun rise from her balcony, still wearing the clothes she had thrown on hours before, her eyes swollen from crying and her heart feeling like something that had been dropped and shattered on stone. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Luca's face, the way he had looked at her in the pool like she was something precious, the way he had defended her against Bianca, fierce and protective. And then the way he had shut down, walls slamming into place, pushing her away before she could get any closer to the broken heart he was so determined to protect. She understood it, in a way. Fear made people do terrible things. Fear of being hurt, of being left, of loving someone, and losing them. She had felt that fear herself, had let it keep her in a relationship with Jeremy long past the point when she should have walked away. But understanding something and accepting it were two different things. Luca Rossi had decided she was not worth the risk, and there was nothing she could do to change his mind. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. She wiped her face quickly and crossed the room, expecting Serena, expecting wedding chaos, expecting anything except what she found. A single rose, deep red, lying on the stone floor of the hallway. No note, no explanation, just the flower, perfect and alone. Candice picked it up and felt her throat tighten. She knew who had left it. She knew what it meant. The rose from his mother's garden. The one he had tattooed over his heart, the symbol of everything he had lost and everything he was afraid to find again. It was an apology, maybe even a plea. She carried the rose back into her room and set it on the dresser, and then she began the long process of making herself presentable for her best friend's wedding. The ceremony was held in a garden on the villa's grounds. Rows of white chairs arranged beneath an arbor dripping with flowers, the Tuscan hills rolling away in every direction like a painted backdrop. Candice stood at the front in her emerald maid-of-honor dress, holding a bouquet that matched the bride's, watching Serena walk down the aisle on her father's arm and trying desperately not to cry. Luca stood on the other side of the arbor, next to his brother. He looked devastated. There was no other word for it. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his grey eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance, as if he could not bear to look at anything real. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, but even expensive fabric could not hide the tension in his shoulders or the shadows under his eyes. He had not slept either. Candice could see that. Some petty part of her was glad. The ceremony began, and the officiant spoke words about love and commitment and choosing each other every single day. Candice tried to focus on Serena, on the tears streaming down her best friend's face, on the way Marco looked at his bride like she had hung every star in the sky. But her attention kept drifting to the man across the aisle, the one who had held her in his arms and then let her go. Love is not simply a feeling, the officiant was saying. It is a choice. A decision we make again and again, to put someone else's happiness alongside our own, to stay when leaving would be easier, to fight for something even when we are afraid. Candice felt those words land like blows. She had been willing to fight. She had been willing to take the risk. But Luca had chosen fear instead. The vows came next, and Marco spoke first, his voice thick with emotion as he promised to love Serena through every storm and every sunny day, to choose her always, to never stop trying to be worthy of her love. Then Serena spoke, and her words were simpler, but no less powerful. I choose you. Today and tomorrow and every day after that, I choose you even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because loving you is the best thing I've ever done, and I'm not about to stop now. Candice's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears at bay, and when she looked up she found Luca watching her. The pain in his expression nearly undid her. There was so much there, so much he was not saying, so much she could read in the grey depths of his eyes. Regret, longing, the desperate wish to take back everything he had said the night before. But none of that mattered if he was not willing to act on it. Words without action were just noise. She looked away first. The ceremony ended with a kiss that made the guests cheer and the birds scatter from the nearby trees. Marco and Serena walked back down the aisle together, radiant with joy, and the wedding party followed. Candice passed within feet of Luca as she walked, close enough to touch, close enough to smell the cologne she had buried her face in just hours before. She did not look at him. She could not afford to. The reception was held on the main terrace, transformed for the occasion into something out of a fairy tale. White linens and crystal glassware and flowers everywhere, candles flickering in the warm afternoon light, a string quartet playing something soft and romantic. The infinity pool had been cordoned off, but Candice could see it glinting in the distance, and the sight of it made her chest ache. She performed her maid-of-honor duties with mechanical precision. She gave her toast, a speech about friendship and love and finding your person that she had written weeks ago, before Luca, before everything. She danced with the groomsmen and made small talk with relatives and smiled until her face hurt. She was the picture of the perfect wedding party member. Inside, she was falling apart. Luca kept his distance, which was both a relief and a torture. She would catch glimpses of him across the terrace, talking to family members, dancing with elderly aunts, doing his own version of the performance she was putting on. Once, their eyes met across the crowd, and she saw him start to move toward her before stopping himself, his hands clenching at his sides. Good, she thought. Let him suffer. Let him feel what it's like to want something and believe you can't have it. But the thought brought no satisfaction, only more pain. By late afternoon, Candice could not take it anymore. The happiness around her was suffocating, all these people celebrating love while her own heart lay in pieces at her feet. She slipped away from the reception, found a quiet corner of the villa, and pulled out her phone to check flight availability. There was a red-eye leaving Florence that night. If she left now, she could make it. She did not want to abandon Serena, not really. But staying here, watching Luca from across the room, pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine at all, it was more than she could bear. She would text Serena from the airport. She would explain. Her best friend would understand. Candice hurried back to her room and began to pack. She was folding the yellow dress she had worn to the welcome mixer, the one she had been wearing the first time Luca spoke to her, when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, stopping right outside her door. A knock. 3 sharp raps that sounded almost desperate. Candice, his voice. Low and rough and wrecked in a way she had never heard before. She did not answer. She did not move. She stood in the middle of her room with that green dress in her hands and willed him to go away. Candice, please. I know you're in there. I need to talk to you. There's nothing left to say. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You made your decision. I'm making mine. A long pause. Then softer. I was wrong. You were a lot of things. Wrong is just the beginning. I know that. But please just give me a few minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain, and then if you still want to leave, I won't stop you. I'll drive you to the airport myself. Candice set down the dress. Her hands were shaking. Every instinct told her to stay strong, to protect herself, to not give him another chance to hurt her. But there was something in his voice, something broken and desperate, that made her cross to the door despite herself. She opened it. Luca stood in the hallway looking like a man who had been to war. His suit jacket was gone, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled as if he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. His grey eyes were red-rimmed, and there was a vulnerability in his expression that she had never seen before. 5 minutes, she said. Talk. He took a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep, somewhere wounded. I've spent my entire life building walls, he began. After my mother died, After my father made it clear that emotions were weakness and love was a liability, I decided the safest thing was to feel nothing, to want nothing, to need nothing. I built a company and a fortune and a life that didn't require me to be vulnerable to anyone." He paused. "And then you walked onto that terrace, and everything I thought I knew about myself turned out to be a lie. Luca, let me finish, please." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could see the rapid pulse at his throat. "What I said last night about being realistic, about you being better off without me, that was fear talking, pure, pathetic fear. Because the truth is, I'm not afraid of you leaving. I'm afraid of you staying. I'm afraid of what happens if I let myself love you and then lose you. I'm afraid that I've been broken for so long that I don't know how to be whole anymore." Candice felt tears prick at her eyes. "That's not good enough. Admitting you're scared doesn't fix anything if you're still going to run." "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A piece of paper, folded small and worn at the edges. "I've been carrying this around all day, trying to find the courage to give it to you. It's a boarding pass for a flight to New York next week." She stared at the paper in his hand. "What?" "I'm not asking you to stay in my world. I'm asking if I can come to yours." His voice cracked. "I'm asking for a chance to do this right. Not 48 hours, not a wedding weekend fling, but something real. Something that requires me to show up, to fight for it, to prove that I can be the man you deserve." He caught her hands in his, and his touch was warm and slightly trembling. "Candice, I have spent the last 12 hours imagining my life without you in it, and I can't do it. I tried. I told myself that letting you go was the noble thing, the right thing, that I was protecting you from my own inability to love. But standing in that ceremony, listening to my brother promise to choose his wife every single day, I realized that I was using protection as an excuse for cowardice." He lifted her hands to his chest, pressing them against his heart, and she could feel it racing beneath her palms. "This," he said, "this is what you do to me. I can run companies that employ thousands of people. I can negotiate deals worth billions of dollars. I can walk into any room in the world and command attention. But the thought of losing you makes me feel like I can't breathe. And if that's not love, I don't know what is." Candice's tears were falling now, hot tracks down her cheeks that she did not bother to wipe away. "You hurt me. Last night, when you pushed me away, it felt like Jeremy all over again. It felt like confirmation of everything I've always feared about myself." "I know." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "And I'm so sorry. I was so busy protecting myself from pain that I caused you pain instead, and that makes me no better than the man who broke your heart. But Candice, I swear to you, if you give me another chance, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel that way again. I will choose you every single day. I will stay when it's hard. I will fight for this even when I'm scared. Especially when I'm scared, because losing you to my own cowardice is the only thing that truly terrifies me now." She pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, any hint that this was another performance, but there was nothing there except raw, naked truth. He was laying himself bare before her, offering his broken heart and asking her to take the risk of helping him make it whole. "What about your work?" she asked. "Your life in Milan, the 18-hour days and the constant travel and all the reasons you said this couldn't work? I'll figure it out. I'll delegate. I'll hire people who can handle the things I've been handling myself because I was afraid to trust anyone else. My company is important, but it's not more important than this." He cupped her face in his hands. "You said I was a coward, and you were right. But I'm trying to be brave now. I'm trying to choose love over fear, even though fear is all I've known for most of my life. Please, Candice, please give me the chance to prove I can be different." She stood there in his hands, feeling the warmth of his palms against her cheeks, looking into grey eyes that held nothing back. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came after. She thought about Jeremy, about the safe choice that had turned out to be anything but safe. She thought about the walls she had built around her own heart, the fear of being hurt that made her want to run before anyone could leave her. She thought about Serena and Marco downstairs, dancing at their wedding reception, choosing each other despite the risk, because love was worth it. And she thought about Luca, about the way he had looked at her from across the terrace that first night, like he had been waiting for her without knowing it. About the way he had held her in the pool, touching her like she was something precious. About the rose he had left at her door, the only way he knew to say he was sorry. "I have conditions," she said. Hope flared in his eyes. "Anything. We take this slow. We date like normal people date. Dinners and phone calls and actually getting to know each other when we're not in a Tuscan fantasy land. Done. You come to New York first. You see my tiny apartment and my messy life, and you meet my friends and my family, and you don't run away when you realize I'm not nearly as put together as I look." "I would never run." He said it like a vow. "I've done enough running. I want to stay. And if it gets hard, if we fight or disagree or have moments when it seems easier to give up, you don't just shut down and push me away. You talk to me. You let me in. You choose to fight for us even when you're scared." "Candice." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her like he was afraid she might disappear. "I will spend the rest of my life learning how to do that. I will fail sometimes, probably often, but I will never stop trying. You're worth the effort. You're worth everything." She leaned into him, letting his warmth seep into her, letting herself believe that this might actually work. "Then yes, 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 I'll give you another chance." She tilted her face up to look at him. "But I swear, if you break my heart again, I will hunt you down and make you regret it." He laughed, a sound of pure relief, and then he was kissing her, deep and desperate and full of promise. It was not the hungry kisses they had shared before, full of urgency and limited time. This was something different. This was a beginning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca pressed his forehead against hers and smiled in a way that transformed his entire face. "Come back to the reception with me," he said. "Dance with me in front of everyone. Let them see that you're mine and I'm yours, and I don't care who knows it. People will talk. Let them talk. I want the whole world to know that I found someone worth changing for. Someone worth being brave for." He kissed her again, soft and sweet. "Someone I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve." Candice took his hand. "Then, let's go scandalize some Italian aristocrats." They walked back to the reception together, fingers interlaced, not caring about the stares that followed them. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, and the string quartet was playing something slow and romantic. Serena spotted them first and let out a squeal of delight that made half the guests turn around. "I knew it," she said, rushing over to throw her arms around Candice. "I knew something was going on with you two. You've been making eyes at each other all weekend." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," Candice started, but Serena waved her off. "Are you kidding? This is the best wedding gift ever. My maid of honor and my new brother-in-law. Falling in love at my wedding?" She beamed at Luca. "You better treat her right. She's the best person I know." "I'm beginning to understand that," Luca said, and his eyes never left Candice's face. Marco appeared beside his bride, looking between his brother and Candice with an expression of amused disbelief. "I don't think I've ever seen you smile like that," he said to Luca. "It's unsettling. Get used to it." Luca pulled Candice closer. "I have a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot more smiling from now on." They danced as the sun set over the Tuscan hills, bodies pressed close, moving to music that seemed to exist just for them. Luca held her like she was something infinitely valuable, one hand at the small of her back, the other cradling her fingers against his chest. The other guests watched, whispered, wondered, but Candice did not care. She was exactly where she wanted to be. "I meant what I said," Luca murmured against her hair. "Every word. I know. I'm going to spend my whole life proving it to you, making sure you never doubt for a single moment that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. That's a big promise. I'm good at keeping promises. Ask anyone who's ever done business with me." He pulled back to look at her, and his grey eyes were soft in a way she had not seen before. "But more importantly, I want to keep this one. I want to be the man you deserve. I want to be worthy of you. You already are," she said. "You just didn't believe it." "I'm starting to." He kissed her, soft and sweet, right there on the dance floor in front of everyone. "You make me want to believe a lot of things I'd given up on." They stayed at the reception until the stars came out and the candles burned low in their holders. They danced and drank champagne and accepted the congratulations of guests who seemed genuinely happy for them, even Bianca, who approached with a stiff apology and a grudging acknowledgement that she had never seen Luca look at anyone the way he looked at Candice. But eventually, the crowd thinned and the music slowed, and the bride and groom disappeared to begin their honeymoon. Candice and Luca found themselves alone on the edge of the terrace, looking out at the view that had become the backdrop of the most unexpected week of her life. "Come with me," Luca said. "There's something I want to show you." He led her through the villa and out into the olive grove where they had picnicked just yesterday, though it felt like a lifetime ago. The moon was full, casting silver light through the twisted branches, and the air smelled like lavender and ripening grapes and possibility. They stopped beneath the same ancient tree, and Luca turned to face her with an expression she could not quite read. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something I should have told you last night before I let fear get the better of me." Candice's heart stuttered. "What is it?" He took a breath. "I started falling for you the moment I saw you across that terrace. Not attraction, not interest, but something deeper. Something that felt like recognition, like my soul had been waiting for yours and finally found it." He shook his head. "That sounds insane. I know it sounds insane. I don't believe in things like that, or I didn't, but then you looked at me and I felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Luca, I spent the whole weekend trying to convince myself it was just chemistry, just physical attraction, just the unique circumstances of a wedding in a beautiful place. But then I held you in that pool and you told me about your heartbreak, and I realized that what I felt for you had nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with you." He took her hands in his. "I love you, Candice. I know it's too fast. I know we've only known each other for days, but I love you, and I will love you for as long as you'll let me. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me." The words hit her like a wave, overwhelming and perfect. She had been so afraid of feeling too much, too fast, of being the one who fell harder, of getting hurt again. But here was this beautiful, broken man, telling her he loved her, and she realized that fear had no place here anymore. "I love you too," she said, and the words felt like coming home. "I tried not to. I told myself it was just a fling, just a distraction, just something to help me forget about Jeremy. But then you kissed me, and you held me, and you looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered, and I fell so hard I didn't even feel myself falling." Luca's smile was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Luca Rossi. Even though you're impossible and arrogant and you almost ruined this before it started. I love you too, Candice Blanc, even though you're stubborn and sharp-tongued and you see right through every wall I try to build." He kissed her, and there was nothing desperate about it now. It was a promise, sealed in moonlight and olive leaves, and the certainty of a future neither of them had expected to find. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, listening to the sounds of the Tuscan night and letting the reality of what they had chosen sink in. It would not be easy. There would be distance and challenges and all the complications that came with building a life with another person. But for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, they were not afraid. They were choosing love. And that made all the difference. 1 year later, Candice stood in the window of her Brooklyn apartment, watching the sun rise over the city she had always called home. The view was not Tuscan hills and ancient vineyards, just brick buildings and fire escapes and the distant gleam of the East River, but she loved it anyway. It was hers. The apartment had changed in the past year. There were touches of Luca everywhere now, a sleek espresso machine he had shipped from Italy because American coffee offended him, a leather jacket thrown over the back of her reading chair, photographs of the two of them in places she had never imagined visiting. There was also a second toothbrush in her bathroom and a drawer full of clothes that did not belong to her, and a calendar on the wall marked with the dates of his visits, which had become more and more frequent as the months passed. Long distance had been hard, just as she had expected. There were missed calls, and time zone confusions, and moments when she ached for him so badly she could barely breathe. But there were also surprise visits and weekend trips to places she had only dreamed of, and hours-long video calls where they talked about everything and nothing until one of them fell asleep mid-sentence. He was learning to delegate, just as he had promised. The company that had consumed his life for so long was still thriving, but it no longer required his constant attention. He had hired good people, built systems that could function without him, and for the first time in his adult life, he was learning what it meant to have a life outside of work. She heard him stir behind her, the rustle of sheets, the low grumble of a man who was not yet ready to face the day. "You're thinking too loud again." His voice was rough with sleep. "Come back to bed." Candice turned to look at him, sprawled across her bed like he owned it, dark hair disheveled and grey eyes half closed against the morning light. Even after a year, the sight of him still made her heart skip. "I was just thinking about the wedding," she said. "Whose wedding?" "Serena and Marco's. A year ago today." He propped himself up on one elbow, more awake now. "Has it really been a year? 12 months? 365 days, give or take, and you've tolerated me for every one of them." He smiled, that slow, devastating smile that still made her knees weak. "You deserve a medal. At minimum." She crossed to the bed and sat on the edge, letting him pull her down beside him. "I was thinking about how scared I was, how sure I was that you were going to break my heart. I almost did. But you didn't. You chose differently." She traced the line of his jaw with one finger. "That's the thing people don't understand about love. It's not about being perfect. It's about choosing to try, again and again, even when it's hard." Luca caught her hand and brought it to his lips. "You've taught me that. You've taught me so many things I thought I was too broken to learn. You were never broken. Just scared. Same thing sometimes." He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side like she belonged there, which she did. "I have something to tell you. I've been thinking about the long-distance thing, how hard it's been, how much I hate getting on planes to leave you." Candice's heart started to race. And I've decided to do something about it." He shifted so he could look at her properly. "I'm opening a New York office. For the company. It's something I've been considering for years, but I never had a reason to actually do it. Now I do." She stared at him. "You're moving to New York?" "I'm moving to New York, if you'll have me." His grey eyes searched her face. "I know it's a big step. I know we've been doing this whole slow thing, dating like normal people, not rushing, but I love you, Candice. I want to build a life with you. A real life. Not one that's separated by an ocean. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night and argue about whose turn it is to make coffee and all the other mundane, beautiful things that people who love each other get to do." Candice felt tears prick at her eyes. "You really want that? The mundane stuff? I want everything with you, the extraordinary and the ordinary, the adventures and the quiet nights at home, all of it." He cupped her face in his hands. "You're my home, Candice. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." She kissed him, and it was like the first time all over again, full of promise and possibility and the certainty that they had found something worth keeping. "Yes," she said against his lips, 1,000 times yes. His smile was brighter than the sunrise. "I was hoping you'd say that. What would you have done if I'd said no? Kept asking until you changed your mind." He kissed her again. "I'm very persistent. It's one of my more annoying qualities." They lay there as the morning light grew stronger, wrapped in each other and the future they were building together. It would not always be easy. There would be challenges and disagreements and moments when they both wondered what they had gotten themselves into. But they would face all of it together, choosing each other every single day, just as they had chosen each other a year ago in a Tuscan olive grove under a full moon. "I love you," Luca said, and the words still sounded like a miracle every time he spoke them. "More than I ever thought I could love anything. I love you too." Chandis pressed her palm against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her hand. "More than I was ever brave enough to hope for." Outside the window, New York was waking up, the city that never slept stirring to life. In a few hours, they would join it, stepping out into the world they were building together. But for now, they stayed exactly where they were, holding on to each other and the love that had found them when neither of them was looking for it. The end. So tell me, did Luca's grand gesture make your heart skip a beat, or did you want to see him work even harder for Chandis's forgiveness? Which moment gave you the most butterflies? And if you could ask Luca one question about his journey from closed-off billionaire to a man willing to move across the world for love, what would it be? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I would love to know which part of their story stayed with you the longest. I'll see you in my next story. Lots of love.